Welcome back to the trading floor. I'm David Axtell. Episode 14. We're continuing part 4. And today we're going inside a bank treasury to answer a question that drives trillions of dollars of daily activity. How do you fund assets in a currency you don't naturally have? Last episode, I explained FX swap mechanics, near leg, far leg, swap points. Today, we see why it matters, because this isn't abstract. This is how the global banking system actually works. Let me set up the problem. You're the treasurer of a large European bank, Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas, Société Générale. Pick one. Your deposit base is primarily euros. Your customers in Frankfurt, Paris, and Amsterdam deposit euros. That's your natural funding currency. But your loan book is global. You have dollar-denominated corporate loans in New York, sterling mortgage exposures in London, yen-denominated positions from your Tokyo branch. You need to fund assets in currencies you don't naturally collect. Non-US banks collectively hold over $13 trillion in dollar-denominated assets. That's a BIS figure. 13 trillion. And much of it is funded not through dollar deposits, which these banks don't naturally have, but through FX swaps. This is the single biggest use case for the FX swap market, synthetic cross-currency funding. Let me walk you through how it works. Your bank has excess euro deposits. Let's say you can fund euros at the ECB rate 3.75%. You need $200 billion for your US loan portfolio. You execute a 3-month Euro-USD swap. Near leg, sell euros, receive dollars. Far leg, buy euros back, return dollars. The dollar funding cost is determined by the swap points plus the cross-currency basis. Here's where the textbook gets it wrong. In theory, covered interest parity says the cost should simply be the dollar interest rate. Borrow euros at 3.75, swap into dollars. The swap points adjust so your all-in cost equals the dollar rate of 5.25, clean, elegant, arbitrage-free. In practice, that hasn't been true since 2008. The cross-currency basis means you pay more. For Euro USD, the basis has averaged negative 30 to 50 basis points since the financial crisis. That means your synthetic dollar funding costs 5.25 plus 30 to 50 basis points, 5.55 to 5.75% every quarter, year after year. That might not sound like much, but on $200 billion, 50 basis points is $1 billion a year, real money, hitting your net interest margin, affecting your lending decisions, shaping your entire strategy. Why does the basis exist? This is one of the most important questions in modern financial markets. Before 2008, covered interest parity held almost perfectly. The basis was within 5 basis points, essentially zero. Banks could fund in any currency at close to theoretical cost. The textbooks were right. Then the crisis happened. And 3 structural changes created a permanent basis. First, Basel III, the new regulatory framework, imposed leverage ratio constraints on bank balance sheets. FX swaps consume balance sheet capacity. Dealers who used to arbitrage away basis deviations can no longer do so profitably because the capital charge eats the profit. The natural arbitrage mechanism is broken. Second, structural dollar demand. European and Japanese banks have massive dollar asset books. They need to roll their swap funding continuously. That creates a permanent, one-directional flow in the swap market. Sell euros, buy dollars, over and over. That demand pressure pushes the basis wider. Third, market segmentation. Not every participant has equal access to the swap market. Smaller banks face wider spreads. Some institutions have credit line constraints. The market isn't perfectly competitive, and frictions prevent efficient pricing. The result? A persistent tax on cross-currency funding that shows no sign of disappearing. The basis is now a structural feature of global financial markets. Treasury professionals who ignore it are mispricing their funding. So, how do banks optimize? Smart treasury operations don't rely on a single funding source. They build diversified programs across multiple channels, each with different cost profiles, risk characteristics, and stress resilience. Let me give you a typical framework. 40 to 50% from secured repo. Treasury bonds as collateral, lowest cost, most stable availability during stress, but requires high-quality collateral you might not want to encumber. 20 to 30% from rolling short-dated FX swaps, TOM next or 1 week. Tactically optimized, flexible, but exposed to rollover risk and basis volatility. 15 to 20% from unsecured deposits and commercial paper. Relationship banking maintains your credit standing, but most vulnerable during stress events, the first channel to close. 5 to 10% from committed credit facilities, pure contingency, expensive to maintain, you hope never to use them, but when everything else closes, this is your lifeline. The blended cost across all channels is typically 50 to 75 basis points below what you'd pay if you relied entirely on unsecured funding. And the diversification means no single market disruption forces you into emergency measures. This is professional treasury management, not minimizing today's cost, optimizing the cost-risk trade-off across all market conditions. The Japanese banks face the most extreme version of this problem. Mitsubishi UFJ, Sumitomo Mitsui, Mizuho. Collectively, they hold $300 to $500 billion in US assets, funded largely through yen-dollar swaps. The JPY USD basis has been even wider than Euro USD at times, -30 to -60 basis points. At those levels, the annual basis cost is $1.5 to $3 billion. Across the three megabanks, that's potentially $10 billion a year in excess funding costs over theoretical parity. This has prompted a strategic rethink. The biggest Japanese banks have been investing heavily in building natural dollar deposit franchises in the United States, opening branches, acquiring smaller banks, competing for American deposits. Not because it's cheap, building a deposit franchise takes years and costs billions, but because the perpetual basis cost of synthetic funding is even more expensive over a 10-year horizon. The target for most Japanese megabanks is a hybrid model: 60% natural dollar deposits, 40% synthetic swap funding, reducing basis dependence without eliminating the tactical flexibility that swaps provide. That's a strategic decision shaped entirely by FX swap mechanics and basis pricing. If you don't understand swaps, you can't understand why the biggest banks in the world are spending billions to restructure their funding. Let me touch on stress scenarios, because this is where swap funding goes from convenient to dangerous. March 2020. COVID hits. Market seize. The EUR-USD cross-currency basis blows out, from -30 to -140 basis points in a matter of days. Dollar funding via swaps becomes extraordinarily expensive. Some smaller European banks are effectively locked out. What saved the system? The Federal Reserve. Dollar swap lines with other central banks. The ECB, Bank of Japan, Bank of England, Swiss National Bank. The Fed said, "We will provide dollars. Unlimited quantity, fixed price." Those swap lines are the subject of a later episode. But the point for today is this: FX swap funding is flexible, efficient, and cheap in normal markets. In stress, it can disappear or become prohibitively expensive. The basis is the barometer. When it spikes, the system is under strain. This is why regulators care about FX swap exposures, why the BIS has called them hidden debt, why liquidity stress tests include swap rollover scenarios, and why every bank treasury needs a contingency plan for when the swap market closes. Let me also mention quarter-end and year-end effects, because they're predictable and significant. At every quarter-end, banks window dress their balance sheets for regulatory reporting. Swap activity drops as dealers reduce balance sheet usage. The basis typically widens by 5 to 15 basis points in the last week of each quarter. At year-end, the effect is even larger, 20 to 30 basis points of additional cost. If you're a corporate treasurer and you need to roll a swap on December 31st, you're paying significantly more than on December 15th. Smart treasury teams plan around these calendar effects. Execute rolls before quarter end. Extend tenors to bridge over reporting dates. Avoid being a forced buyer of swap funding when the market knows you need it. These are practical details that don't make it into textbooks, but they save real money. To sum up, FX swaps aren't just a product. They're the funding infrastructure of the global banking system. $13 trillion of non-US bank assets depend on them. The cross-currency basis is a permanent cost that shapes strategic decisions at the highest levels. And the stress behavior of the swap market is a systemic risk that central banks actively monitor and manage. Next episode, we go to the central banks themselves, dollar swap lines, crisis interventions, how the Fed became the lender of last resort to the entire world's dollar funding needs, and what that means for the FX market. This is The Trading Floor. I'm David Axtell. FX Cash Products by Luigi Rondanini and myself is now available through all major marketplaces and directly from rondanini.com. The chapter on funding applications walks through synthetic borrowing calculations, basis decomposition, and multi-source funding frameworks in full detail. For more depth, visit learn.rondanini.com. 122 professional mini-manuals, plus production-ready Python tools for funding cost analysis, basis tracking, and swap program optimization. For corporate treasury teams navigating dollar funding strategy or regulatory liquidity requirements, Luigi provides consultancy through rondanini.net. And for institutions needing FX and treasury expertise, I'm available through axtellconsulting.net. See you in episode 15.